The woman who walked through that courthouse door was not supposed to be there. She was supposed to be at home, in that small apartment in the east side of Atlanta with the leaking faucet and the second-hand furniture, keeping her head down like she had always done. That was what Miriam Oseboteng had been told her whole life. Keep your head down. Don't make noise. Don't embarrass the family. But there she was. And the family was very, very embarrassed. Let me take you back to where this all started, because you need to understand who Miriam was before you can understand what she did. Miriam grew up in Tema, Ghana, in a house where the roof leaked when it rained, and her mother, Comfort, stretched every seti like it was made of rubber. Comfort worked as a seamstress out of the front room of their house. 3 sewing machines, a dim bulb, and a spirit that refused to break. Miriam learned to sew sitting at her mother's feet. She also learned that a woman could work harder than any man in the room and still be the last one thanked at the end of the day. She came to America at 22 on a student visa, studied accounting at Georgia State, stayed because she got a job, built a life one careful decision at a time. By 31, Miriam had her own small tax consulting practice on Campbellton Road, a reliable car, and a reputation in the Ghanaian community in Atlanta as someone you could trust with your money. She also had Tobias Kweku Asante. She should have known from the beginning. Not because there was anything wrong with Tobias, there wasn't. Tobias was kind and steady and laughed with his whole body. The problem was his mother. Her name was Celestine Asante. In the Ghanaian community in Atlanta, Celestine Asante was known for 2 things: her money and her opinions about who deserved it. Her late husband had built a real estate portfolio across DeKalb County before he died, and Celestine had spent the 12 years since managing it with an iron hand and making sure everyone knew she had done so without help. She sat on 3 church committees, donated to 2 community organizations, and spoke at every event she attended as though she had been personally invited by God. She had 1 son. Tobias was everything to her, and she had decided, long before Miriam ever entered the picture, exactly what kind of woman her son would marry. Miriam was not that woman. The first time Tobias brought Miriam to Sunday dinner, Celestine looked at her the way you look at a stain on a good tablecloth. She said all the right words. "How lovely to meet you. Welcome to our home. Please eat." But her eyes said something else entirely. Miriam saw it. She had grown up around women who smiled while they sharpened their knives. She recognized the blade. "So your mother sews?" Celestine said, midway through the meal in the tone of someone making idle conversation. "She does. She's very talented," Miriam said. Celestine touched her wine glass. "And your father?" "He passed when I was 9. "Oh." A pause. "I'm sorry to hear that." She did not sound sorry. After dinner, when Tobias went to help his younger cousin carry something to the car, Celestine sat across from Miriam at the cleared table and folded her hands. "I want you to understand something," she said. "My son is not an ordinary man. He has a legacy, a name. What I have built, what his father built, it doesn't just belong to Tobias. It belongs to the next generation. And the woman who carries that name needs to understand what she's walking into." Miriam kept her voice even. "I think I do understand. Do you?" Celestine tilted her head. "Because a woman who grew up the way you did, who is still building, still finding her footing, there is nothing wrong with that. I respect the hustle. But there is a difference between respect and readiness. You are not ready for this family, Miriam. And I think, if you're honest with yourself, you know that." Miriam looked at this woman across the table. The chandelier above them cost more than her first car. The ring on Celestine's finger was bigger than most people's ambitions. She smiled. "Thank you for dinner, Mrs. Asante. The jollof was wonderful." She did not tell Tobias what his mother said that night. She should have. But she loved him, and she believed that love was enough to build on, and so she kept quiet and kept going. They got engaged 8 months later. Tobias proposed at Piedmont Park at sunset with his grandmother's ring. Miriam said yes before he finished the sentence. They called their families. They celebrated. They set a date, 11 months out. A Saturday in June at a venue in Buckhead. Not too big, not too small. Exactly what they both wanted. Celestine did not congratulate Miriam when she heard. She called Tobias. "You should have talked to me first," she told him. "Mama, I'm 34 years old." "That's not what I said." She did not call Miriam at all. From that point forward, it became a slow, deliberate campaign. Celestine had a talent for it, the kind of warfare that leaves no fingerprints. She would call Tobias at odd hours to discuss things that didn't need discussing. She would invite him to family events on dates that conflicted with their wedding planning appointments, then express hurt when he couldn't come to both. She told her friends, and Celestine had many friends, the kind whose opinions moved through the community like weather, that she was concerned about the match, that Miriam was sweet but not quite suited, that she hoped Tobias knew what he was doing. Those words traveled, words always do in a community that small. 3 months before the wedding, Celestine showed up at Miriam's office. Miriam was between clients. She looked up and saw Celestine standing in her doorway in a dove-gray suit, handbag on her arm like a weapon she hadn't decided whether to use yet. "Mrs. Asante, may I sit?" Miriam gestured to the chair across from her desk. Celestine sat. She smoothed her skirt. She took her time. "I'm going to be direct with you," Celestine said. "I've tried to give this time. I've tried to trust my son's judgment. But I have a responsibility to this family that is bigger than any one person's feelings, including my own." Miriam waited. Celestine placed an envelope on the desk. $50,000, she said. "Wired to any account you choose. I've spoken to an attorney. The arrangement would be completely private. You end the engagement. You keep the money. You move on. You're a smart woman. You don't need my son to build a good life." Miriam stared at the envelope. She thought about her mother's sewing machines. She thought about the leaking roof in Tema. She thought about every year she had worked 2 jobs, filed her taxes on time, built something out of nothing in a city that hadn't made it easy. She thought about Tobias's hand in hers at Piedmont Park, the way he'd said her name before he got down on one knee. She looked up at Celestine. "You should leave," Miriam said. Celestine blinked. "I don't think you understand what I'm offering. I understand perfectly." Miriam stood. "And I want you to leave my office, Mrs. Asante." Now, Celestine left. But she did not stop. 2 weeks later, the venue called. There had been a scheduling conflict. Their date had been given to another client. They were very sorry. They would refund the deposit. Miriam's caterer called the following week with a similar story. Then the florist. She couldn't prove it. She told Tobias about each cancellation, and he was furious, and he confronted his mother. And Celestine denied everything with the practiced ease of someone who had been denying things for decades. "Why would I do that? I just want my son to be happy." And Tobias wanted to believe her, the way children always want to believe the parent who raised them, even when the evidence is stacking up like bricks. They found new vendors. They adjusted. Miriam did not sleep well during any of it, but she kept her face calm at work and her voice steady at home. And she told herself that once the wedding was done, once they were married, the worst of it would be over. What she did not know was that Celestine had one more move. The morning of the wedding, Miriam's maid of honor, her cousin Adwomea, came to the hotel room with her hair half done and her face tight. "Miriam." She closed the door behind her. "I need to show you something." It was a screenshot. Someone had sent it to the church's private group chat. A parent committee that handled event scheduling. and which Celestine happened to sit on. The message was anonymous, but the content was not. It claimed that Miriam had been investigated for financial fraud 2 years ago, that her tax practice was under scrutiny, that Tobias was marrying a woman who might end up in federal court. It was a lie, a complete, fabricated, specific lie. But it had been sent to 37 people, many of whom were attending the wedding that afternoon. And in the 2 hours before a ceremony, a lie travels faster than any truth can run. Miriam read it. She sat down on the edge of the bed in her wedding dress and she read it again. She did not cry. She had cried already, in the shower at 4 in the morning when she couldn't sleep, in the car on the way to her dress fitting, in small private moments she hadn't shared with anyone. She was done crying about Celestine Asante. She called her attorney. She called the church coordinator. She asked Adwomea to let the guests know there would be a short delay. And then she called the one person she hadn't spoken to in almost 4 years. Her name was Philippa Achiampong. Pippa and Miriam had grown up 3 streets apart in Tema. They had shared school uniforms when one of them outgrew something the other still needed. They had studied for exams at the same kitchen table. When Miriam got her visa to America, Pippa had cried at the airport, holding her so long that comfort had to gently pull them apart. They had stayed close for the first 2 years, long phone calls and voice notes and packages sent back and forth. Then life had gotten busy. Pippa in ways that Miriam didn't fully understand yet, and Miriam in ways that left her apologizing for missed calls she kept meaning to return. The calls got shorter, then they got fewer. Then there was a gap of 6 months that became a year, and by the time Miriam thought to close it, it felt too wide to jump across. She hadn't known what Pippa was doing now. She hadn't asked. She dialed the number anyway. It was an old number. She didn't know if it still worked. It rang twice. Miriam. Pippa's voice was exactly the same. I've been waiting for you to call me for 4 years. But I have a feeling right now you need something more than a catch-up. Miriam laughed. It came out a little broken. Pippa, I'm in trouble. Tell me. She did. All of it. The money, the vendors, the screenshot, the 37 people. Pippa listened without interrupting, which was not like her. Pippa had always been the one who talked over you when she got excited. The silence itself told Miriam something had shifted in her friend. Where are you right now? Pippa said when she finished. The hotel, 2 blocks from the church. Don't move. Don't let them delay the ceremony more than 1 hour. And Miriam, don't let her win. Pippa, where are you? Are you even in Atlanta? A pause. I'm closer than you think. I'll explain later. Just get dressed. Miriam looked at herself in the mirror. Her dress was ivory with gold, threading along the hem, made by her mother, shipped from Tema in a box that had taken 3 weeks to arrive. She straightened her back. She picked up her bouquet. She got dressed. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 o'clock. At 2:15, the guests were seated. The music was playing softly, and Tobias was standing at the altar with his best man, his jaw tight, his eyes moving to the door every few seconds. Celestine sat in the front row on the groom's side. She had worn white. Not quite white. Ivory, she would have said, if anyone asked, but white enough. She held her program and looked straight ahead, and if she felt the weight of what she had done, it did not show on her face. At 2:20, the doors of the church opened. But it was not Miriam who came through them first. It was a woman in a deep burgundy suit, with her hair pinned back and a leather portfolio under her arm. Behind her came 2 more people, also in suits, moving with the kind of quiet efficiency that made the whole room still, and behind them, Miriam. She walked in on Adwomea's arm, her bouquet steady, her chin level, her eyes straight to Tobias at the altar, who let out a breath like he'd been holding it for an hour. The woman in burgundy did not sit down. She walked, calmly, without hurry, to the row where Celestine was seated. She leaned down and said something very quietly, directly into Celestine's ear. The church was silent. You could hear the candles. Celestine's face did not crumple. It did something more interesting than that. It went still. The kind of still that comes when someone has just told you exactly how much they know and exactly how little you have left to stand on. Because Philippa Achiampong was not just Miriam's childhood friend from 3 streets away in Tema. She was the deputy director of the Federal Trade Commission's Southeast Regional Office. She had been for 2 years. She handled fraud cases, financial misconduct, false accusations made in bad faith for the purpose of destroying someone's professional reputation. And the moment Miriam had described that screenshot, the specific language, the targeting of a licensed financial professional, the use of a church community channel to spread it, Pipa had known exactly what it was. She had also known exactly what to call it. What, she whispered to Celestine Asante in that front row, was not a threat. It was a description, a precise, professional, completely accurate description of what a formal complaint would look like, who would be involved, what evidence Miriam's attorney was already pulling together, and how the community they both belonged to would receive the news that Celestine Asante had fabricated federal fraud allegations against her own future daughter-in-law. She also mentioned, gently, that 2 of the vendors who had canceled on Miriam had already confirmed, in writing, who had contacted them and what had been said. Celestine sat through the entire ceremony without making a sound. She did not object when the officiant asked if anyone had cause to speak. She did not meet Miriam's eyes when Tobias put his grandmother's ring on her finger. She did not stand when the guests stood and the church filled with the kind of joy that Miriam had been afraid. For so many months, she would never get to feel. After, in the receiving line, when the photos had been taken and the guests were moving toward the reception hall, Tobias found Pippa standing to the side with a glass of water and her suit jacket folded over her arm. He shook her hand. He couldn't find words right away. She told me about you, he finally said. She missed you. Pippa nodded. I know. I missed her too. She looked toward where Miriam was laughing at something her mother had said, Comfort's face bright with a happiness she had traveled 12 hours to witness. We both got busy. Life does that. Thank you, Tobias said. For today, for all of it. Pippa smiled at him. It was the kind of smile that had seen a few things. Take care of her. She worked hard to get here, I know. Do you? She said it without sharpness, just honesty. Because the people who love women like Miriam, strong women, women who don't complain, who just handle things, they forget, sometimes, that handling everything alone doesn't mean she wants to. Tobias was quiet for a moment. I won't forget. Good. She handed him her card. And if you ever need a referral for a family attorney, I know a few good ones. He laughed. She laughed too. That evening, at the reception, Miriam found a moment to slip away from the table and find Pippa standing near the back of the hall, watching the dancing. They stood next to each other without saying anything for a little while. You didn't tell me what you did for a living, Miriam finally said. You didn't ask. I didn't know I needed to. Pippa turned to look at her. You called me. I almost didn't. I know. Pippa's voice was even, unhurried. But you did. That's what matters. Miriam shook her head slowly. 4 years, Pippa. I should have called just to call, not just when I needed something. Pippa put an arm around her shoulder. You're going to make it up to me. I'm expecting an invitation to everything from now on. Every dinner, every birthday, every boring Sunday, Miriam repeated. Starting with the holidays. I want to meet your mother properly. Not at your wedding, at a table with actual food and enough time to talk. Miriam laughed, and it came from somewhere real, somewhere that had been clenched tight for months, and was only now beginning to release. She's going to love you. Of course she is. Pippa straightened up. Now go back to your husband. You've spent enough time over here with me. Miriam hugged her. Long. The kind of long that said years of things without needing any of them to be spoken out loud. Then she walked back across the room, to the table where Tobias was waiting, where her mother was drying her eyes with a handkerchief, where the music was starting again, and the floor was opening up, and the night was still, somehow, entirely ahead of them. Celestine Asante had not stayed for the reception. She had slipped out quietly, between the ceremony and the cake cutting, the way people do when they understand that the room no longer belongs to them. No one mentioned her absence. No one needed to. Later, much later, after the dancing and the toasts and the long drive to the hotel where they were staying that first night before the flight to Accra for the honeymoon, Tobias sat on the edge of the bed and said, "I'm sorry for all of it. I should have seen it sooner." Miriam sat next to him and took his hand. "You see it now. That's not enough. It's a start." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "It's what we work from." Outside the window, Atlanta kept going the way cities do. Noise and light, and the hum of a million lives happening at the same time. None of them aware of the small, enormous thing that had happened in a church on a Saturday afternoon in June. A woman had been told she was not enough, not ready, not suited, and she had stood up anyway, and a friend had come back from 4 years of silence to stand beside her. That is what this story is about. Not the villain, though the villain was real, and the damage she did was real. Not the twist, though the twist was satisfying in the way that justice sometimes manages to be when it actually shows up. It is about the call Miriam almost didn't make. Because if there is a Philippa Achiampong in your life, someone you've let drift because life got loud, because time moved fast, because you kept meaning to reach out and somehow never did, I want you to hear this. You still have time. Make the call. And if you're new here, and this story found you today, welcome. Subscribe, because there are more stories where this one came from, and every single one of them is about people who chose not to give up. Tell me in the comments, would you have made that call? And would Pippa have answered for you?